Why, hello, everybody. This is Eric Vierthaler of Vierthaler Studios here once again, back again for the next episode of Sit Down by the Fire. I'm here with my next special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Justin Beahm. I'm a producer and writer and documentarian. Thanks for having me on, Eric. Appreciate it.
Yeah, certainly, of course. And I certainly greatly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be a guest on my show.
You bet. You bet. Happy to be here.
Yeah, of course. So just uh and so yeah, and so I guess my first question is what inspired you to pursue being a part of film?
Just being a fan since I was little, my parents were very, very cool about renting any and everything that we could get our hands on when I was a kid. And this was back when the home video boom was really exploding. So there were
Right.
a lot of different video rental places in town. And we had memberships, I think, at just about every single one of them. But they didn't shy away from letting us, my brother and I, rent whatever. And my parents weren't ever avid movie lovers. They still do go to films occasionally, but
Right.
they were very cool with us spending weekends sort of, I'd say, 75% out and about running around with our friends, and then the 25% sitting at home watching through stacks of videotapes. But
Nice.
yeah, that's, I mean, it really, if you're turning all the way back, that's really when it began. It's just a love for watching this stuff when I was little, and then getting really interested in the process of filmmaking through reading different magazines and books and getting exposed to the inside of the business a little bit more over time. That led to a much deeper interest. It's certainly nothing I ever dreamt I would be able to be part of. That was not,
Right.
it wasn't the game plan and not even a goal. But geez, I'm lucky to say that it somehow ended up that way. So
Oh yeah, certainly. And I mean, of course, there's always that old time saying like that the things from your childhood certainly can carry on with you throughout the rest of your life. And it sounds like that's certainly what happened with you.
yeah, absolutely. I think we hold on to a lot. I mean, that's when we're learning about the world and the things that resonate for a reason. You never really know what it's going to land on, though. So hold on to the things that pique your interest because that thing could become your thing and it could be your career or something. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. And then afterwards, you would then can create a ripple effect where, and then when you are inspired by somebody, and then afterwards, you and then inspire others as well.
I think it's, I mean, well, that is certainly an unexpected byproduct if that has occurred for sure. But I think it's good to surround yourself by people that help you explore the things that you want to dive into. And a lot of times that's in your friend circle, and surrounding yourself by supportive people is just everything. And for me, all of this, it's not like about film. It's not about film world or anything like that. It's about relationships. And so
Certainly, yes.
the people that I work with, I consider friends, and that's, I'd rather work with people that I care about and that I trust, and that's really what matters to me in the long run.
Exactly, certainly. It's because that if you surround yourself like with toxic people, especially in the workplace, unfortunately, something like that definitely will catch up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, so would you say that there was one film that inspired you? As far as I could tell, you do seem like a big fan of the Halloween franchise, and then I wouldn't be surprised like if that was one of those films.
Halloween, yeah, Halloween and Halloween 2 were big early on for me, but for me it's the early Universal stuff that really, and it's hard to pick just one out of that, but the universe, those are the movies that really got me interested in learning more about how they were made when I was seeing the Wolfman makeup or
Uh-huh.
Frankenstein. And that led to famous Monsters of Filmland magazines and a lot of older books on filmmaking, genre filmmaking. But yeah, Halloween 2, seeing that on Halloween night, I think I was in fifth grade. That was a huge moment for me at my friend's house that absolutely terrified me and
Uh-huh.
also intrigued me. And I have remained a big fan of the Halloween franchise throughout my life. I mean, a lot of my favorite films aren't even necessarily in the horror genre. Like I love It's a Wonderful Life. I like a lot. I mean, Jaws is probably it may be my all-time favorite film. So that is one that is eternally rewatchable to me, and one that early on really intrigued me because it presented a scenario and something that was so outside of the kinds of movies that you would see just on regular TV. Um, but yeah, so but to your point though, yeah, you're right. Halloween's always been a part of it for sure. Always a part of it.
Yeah, and it's really funny you mentioned the Universal monsters. It's because I actually noticed that there's like a Frankenstein painting right behind you, and I actually would, and and I guess that you answered my question. I actually was going to ask you like if you were a fan of the Universal monsters as a kid, and well, you just answered that.
Yeah, yeah, that's a sketch that Basil Gogos sent me right before shortly before he passed away
Oh, I'm sorry.
of Frankenstein. Yeah, it was really so it's always been really precious to me and I always keep it near me in my office space. But Frankenstein, I love Frankenstein. All iterations of Frankenstein. I think he's my favorite of all those monsters.
Oh yeah, certainly. And and one of the things that I find intriguing about Frankenstein, even though just to be clear, people always confuse the monster like with the scientist, but
Yeah,
it is what it is. I mean, people call the monster Frankenstein. It is what it is, but
yeah.
you know what I mean. It's just the thing is, he's really not a monster if you really think about it. Like he is much more of a it's just more so people just don't really comprehend him, and so and therefore it really makes you think, really deeply. What exactly makes somebody a monster? Is it the way how they look? Is it the way how they act?
Yeah, I think that was a product of its time, referring to people and things that look different primarily as monstrous. And I think that same thing that's interesting you bring that up because that can be said of pretty much I mean really just about all of the original Universal monsters because
Yep.
they're all victims in some way. Like the Frankenstein monster is a victim of a madman who's sort of playing God and constructing this thing that never had its own will to exist. If you look, I love the Creature from the Black Lagoon films.
Yep.
There's three of them, and it's a perfect, very mature arc for that character where the creature is just sort of doing his own thing, living in his environment. Man comes in, messes with him in the first one, and then man retreats. In the second one, man returns, pulls the creature out of its environment. Then he has to break free to get back to his home. And
Hmm.
then the third one, man completely pulls him out of the water. He's burned by man. They find out he can breathe through lungs, doesn't need to be in the water. And then in the end, the creature makes this incredibly outside decision to end his own life. He knows if he walks into the ocean, that he's going to die. He's going to drown. He no longer can breathe in water. And that's how that's the trio of films ends with him making that march into the ocean. And I think that that's such a wildly mature and sort of cerebral and dark thing for a series of films that are ultimately geared at youngsters to do to wrap them up. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so much more depth in those movies and those characters and creatures than what they're given at surface value.
Oh yeah, certainly. And it's really interesting that I mentioned the whole arc about the Gill Man, is because honestly, that wasn't ever really something that I ever thought about, like with all those movies. But now that I mention it, it really does make sense, like with that whole arc, and yeah, and it's a rather tragic arc. But I mean, like for a creature like the Gill Man, it does make sense.
Yeah, it is. It's so tragic, but it's like this three films that tell you man cannot help but be destructive and obsessed with control and especially over nature and animals. And I think it is tragic, but I think it's poignant too. I hope that
Oh
it's
yeah.
not provoking when people arrive at the end of that last film and go, "Whoa, holy cow! There's a message here. There's a message here."
Yeah, which is why that I feel like that maybe that there wasn't any more films after that. It's probably because that Universal was like, well, we said what we needed to say about about the Gill Man, so that's probably why that they didn't think about doing a part four. Although I did hear rumors of a remake, like there almost was a remake by John Carpenter in the 1980s, but for
Right.
whichever reason that didn't happen. So
Yeah, I think after Creature after the last creature film, I think that monsters had kind of fallen out of vogue with audiences because we were now into the realm of sci-fi and aliens and all kinds of otherworldly creatures. And so yeah, I mean the public interest had definitely pivoted from that. And creature is one of those things that keeps coming up every once in a while, kind of like the Blob, which does have a tremendous remake, but it's a
Certainly.
title that every once in a while you hear about, oh, now so and so is going to be remaking Creature, or someone's in development on a remake of Creature, and it just doesn't seem to happen. And I almost wonder if it's not fate's way of just sort of smiling down and going like, this was done just fine. This can exist as these three films, and there's an eternity of ideas and opportunities outside of it.
Certainly.
Maybe we can just focus and invest our money elsewhere or something like that.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, like I heard that Rob Zombie was gonna do like a
Mm-hmm.
Blob remake, and now I'm hearing that James Wan's gonna do a Creature from the Black Lagoon remake. And
That I'm excited about. Now,
oh yeah,
James, I heard the same thing, and I think James would be great for that. He is such a fan, and he everything he does is with such heart. And I've had the luck to interview him once, and he was
awesome.
wonderful, wonderful guy that just loves this stuff from his core. So if anyone's going to do it, I think he'd be a tremendous one to helm it.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And yeah, and I mean, it's something that I hope does go through. Just got to keep your fingers crossed, right?
Yep, yep.
So yeah, and so yeah, on the topic of Universal monsters, according to my research, the original Frankenstein with Boris Karloff and the original Bela Lugosi Dracula actually hit public domain in 2027. So that will be interesting. So I'm just curious. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the source material for both has obviously been in public
Yes,
domain for an eternity now, and I'm a big fan. I'm not opposed at all to remakes or sequels that are down the road or whatever. I love new adaptations. I even enjoyed what was the one with Daniel Radcliffe?
I think it
Um,
was Victor Frankenstein.
Victor Frankenstein. Yeah, that's the last Frankenstein movie I recall seeing as a new one, and I really enjoyed that one. So
Mhm.
yeah, play around in this universe, do something new with it. The originals will always be there. Like back when I was working with the Halloween franchise stuff, there were a lot of people who weren't fans of the remake, like the rebooting of the franchise or whatever. And I'm like, hey, you always have the originals. So I
Exactly.
love I love the mythology behind Dracula, behind Frankenstein, and if some people want to come in and play in that sandbox, geez, I'll show up. I'll be buying tickets for sure.
Yeah,
What do you
exactly.
think? What
Well,
are your thoughts on it?
so what I think will be nice about it, like for a lot of people, is that whenever they hear the name Frankenstein, it's always the Boris Karloff look that comes to people's minds. And a lot of film studios try to get as close as possible
Mm,
without infringing on it. And so that's why that they would put the bolts on the forehead instead of the neck and so on and so forth. And so once when the original goes public domain, people and then like will be more free to use that iconic look. And I think that that definitely could help to make it sell more, since that that's what comes to people's minds.
yeah,
And and yeah, and even the same thing about the Bela Lugosi Count Dracula. But the thing is, since that I actually did interview Lynn Lugosi, who is the granddaughter of Bela. So it's the original movie that will go public domain. But if you want to have the likeness of Bela Lugosi, you and then will have to go through the Lugosi family.
right. Yeah, yeah, and the look of Dracula isn't something that was really tightly protected outside of Bela's face, like you say.
Yeah,
Everything else about it has been aped through many films over time, like the cape, the medallion, the suits, and the top hat, and those things have been done. I think Coppola did an amazing job with it.
oh yeah.
If you think, I mean, one of the best versions of all of these characters, in fact, I would arguably the best, is in the Monster Squad,
Mm-hmm.
which nails every creature perfectly, but with new enough versions that I think it's a fresh take on something. But I hadn't thought about that. The Frankenstein monster look is so iconic, and really a lot of the stuff that's been made over the years, like the old Ben Cooper masks and things, the Glenn Strange Frankenstein. A lot of the merch that's been made isn't even referencing Karloff necessarily, but that flat head with the bolts and everything, yeah. I mean that'll be game on for that look. That's a really good point, Eric.
Exactly, yeah. And on top of that, Universal only will put those movies on Peacock during Halloween, which I mean, I get it that they're horror movies and they probably think that they sell better during Halloween, but yet it also would be nice to have them available on streaming just any time of the year. It's because what if it turns out that somebody's in the mood to watch them like during the spring
Well,
or
that's
something?
what physical media is for, and I'm a huge proponent of physical media. You
Same
buy
as
these
well.
things, yeah, yeah, and stores like Walmart and places like that always have DVD versions of them that are more affordable if you can't pick up Blu-ray sets and whatnot. Universal's done a great job of keeping current versions in media of all these films and continuing to upgrade them and
Mhm.
ups give you a new, like, now there's 4K versions of these things, which is incredible for movies of that age. So, and there's so many tremendous documentaries and interviews, commentaries on all those. There's it's a gold mine if you pick up, especially the complete set from Universal that has all the different Dracula, all the different Frankensteins, the Abbott and Costello monster movies. That is a treasure trove for sure.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And yeah, and that's exactly why that I personally prefer physical media. And now, certainly, of course, if there's a show or a movie that I want to watch on Tubi or Netflix or whichever, I certainly am not going to be against
Sure.
turning that on. It's just the thing that irks me is that they'll have a movie or a TV show that I will like on there, and then when I'm in the mood to watch it again, I will turn on said service and it won't be on there anymore, and
Yeah.
that's kind of frustrating.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And we're, especially now that we're used to having access to things, or even if we had to go rent them historically or something, our generations have known having access to this stuff, and it that is one of the definite faults in the realm of streaming, is that these things are not eternal. It's all based on license duration and how long someone can keep something up there, and then, like you say, the whims of the studio. Well, people only want to watch this stuff in October. Well, not necessarily. you know, you can devote bandwidth to that anytime, and I'm sure people will show up. But physical media, still the best way to make sure it's always on your shelf.
certainly, yeah. And one of the things that I love about physical media, and one of the things that I love about Screen Factory, like, is just all of the features. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just whenever a movie is on like Netflix or Tubi, you don't have that. And I just really love to like absorb information like a sponge. And I just really love to, find out more information about the making of these movies. And yeah, and you mentioned Jaws, and just by coincidence, Jaws is one of my favorite movies of all time. And after the first time that I saw Jaws, it was on DVD on the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
After I got done watching it, I watched the behind the scenes documentary, and I was just so intrigued about the making of Jaws, because making Jaws was not a fun experience.
Right. Yeah, and doesn't it make it a richer experience the next time you visit the film then, because you're like, "Oh my gosh, I remember what they went through to do this." And Jaws is also, that's another, it's Universal again, but
Yep.
that has always been very well cared for. And that 4K presentation on the 4K UHD disc of Jaws is, I still think, just about tops of any restoration that I've seen from any film. And that does include that original documentary and a bunch of new stuff on it. So that's a tremendous release. So good.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And I mean, Spielberg said that he got so stressed out with making Jaws like that. From what I remember, he said that he had nightmares about it.
Hmm.
Oh gosh.
Challenging. Yeah. I mean, everybody that was a part of that went through so much, and all to entertain an audience. And that, at that point, with an idea that no one thought would work. That's a great example. It was the original summer blockbuster, right? No one
Yeah.
thought a movie about a shark. Come on. And lo and behold, it changed cinema, I think, really forever.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And ironically and inadvertently, all of the problems on set actually helped it to be a better movie. It's because, from what I read, it was that mechanical shark they had just wasn't working when they wanted it to. And so, and then that's why that they had to get really creative. Like, that's why there's shots of just the point of view, there's shots of just the shark's fin, and all that you needed was just to hear those two notes,
Yeah.
and like that they more so implied like that the shark was there, and honestly that actually made it into a better movie anyway.
Yeah, and it's a character study. It's not a hack and slash movie. It's about those three men. I mean, ultimately, it's about everyone on the island. And yes, there are outside characters, but it boils down. It like takes this big cast of characters of all the people who live there, and it boils it down eventually to just three men on a boat and this shark. And the depth of their connection, the conflict among them, that's where film is most brilliant. The shark is sort of the pressure cooker on the outside. It's like what Romero did in Night of the Living Dead. It's not even about the ghouls outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the chaos and the strife within the humanity on the inside as people are figuring out how to handle the situation, who would never be in a house together probably if they had a choice outside of this. So how are we going to band together? Can we? And can we get through this? And that's the heart of Jaws. And the subtlety that he used for so many of those shots in that movie. Yeah, you're exactly right, man. That the fact that they weren't able to use the shark for as much as originally intended, I think forced a lot more character play and a
Mm-hmm.
lot more atmospheric setup for shots in the water, on the surface of the water.
Certainly.
The scariest shot in that whole film for me when I was a kid, still to this day, I think it's probably the most effective. When the boys are swimming in the channel and there's that guy in a rowboat out there, that very small, I think it's like a red boat,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's
yeah.
and he says something like, "Hey guys, what are you up to?" or whatever. And then it cuts to this overhead shot of the shark just emerging, turned sideways, just
Mm-hmm.
coming up to him and then pulling him down. Like just seeing the shark emerge from that water like that out of the ether is one of the most terrifying shots in all of cinema. And it's not even the big famous one from the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And what I love about that shot is that yes, you do see the shark, but yet the shark doesn't come completely out of the water.
Right.
And yeah, and that just makes it that much more terrifying.
Yeah, because it's always the unknown, right? That's why as kids, the lights being off in the basement are scary because it's not what you know is there. It's
It's what
what
you
you
don't know.
it's what you imagine could be there. And that's the key to so much in the realm of fright. That's the core of the haunted house, of the dark ride at a carnival. Once the door's shut and you're submerged in that darkness, it's never about what is there, it's about what might be. Yeah.
Exactly. And going back to Halloween, I mean, that's one of the things that terrified me about Michael Myers as a kid is that knowing that you don't know why that he just snapped and that and that he was just so mysterious. I mean, all that you needed to know about Michael Myers was that he had the blackest eyes, and that's all that you needed to really know. And I mean, you just needed to look at that creepy mask and you just needed to hear that iconic John Carpenter score.
Yeah, the power of music. I think Halloween and Jaws are the two greatest examples where people immediately know exactly what it is. Just like if they see a hockey mask, they know it's Jason. Like there are certain
Yeah,
identifiable things, but the
certainly.
score in those two films, just a couple notes on both fronts, the simplicity of it. And I think what scared me the most about Halloween and the shape and Michael Myers was that it was suburbia. It Haddonfield, growing up in Iowa, Haddonfield was my neighborhood. It looked exactly like the same streets that I was walking down on Halloween night or any other time. So I didn't have to go to some gothic castle to encounter a monster. I didn't have to get in the water to be bothered by a shark. All I had to do was go home. And that part of it was the scariest for me. And I think that remains the most effective, most resonant chord in the Halloween films that work well, is that it's the beast has come home and now you're not even safe in your safest confines.
Exactly. I mean, and that's one of the things that made Halloween so terrifying is that knowing that it can happen in your town, knowing that it can happen in anyone's town.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so yeah. So what exactly got you to start up Scream Factory?
Well, I'm a producer for Scream Factory. So, I mean, my company is called Reverend Entertainment, and I do special features for a number of different companies. I do Paramount, Shout, Umbrella out of Australia, Arrow out of the UK. There's been TerraVision, Vinegar Syndrome, Studio Canal. There's a bunch of different companies that I do this for, but Shout Factory was the first one to really bring me in full force. And at that time, I was working for Trancas Films, which is the parent company of the Halloween franchise. And I had produced the discs on Halloween 4 and 5, the first Blu-ray versions of those when they were making the leap from DVD to Blu-ray.
Right.
And I did new commentaries on both those with director Dwight Little on 4, and then Don Shanks, who played Michael, on 5. And the guys at Shout were just launching Scream Factory, which is kind of a sub label there that's all focused on horror genre stuff. And it was two guys behind it, Cliff and Jeff. And they approached me at a convention I was part of one year and asked if I would be interested in joining them for some horror fun in the Scream label. And then we were really off to the races from there. I left Trancas and I started doing this stuff full time, in addition to writing for the magazines like Fangoria and stuff like that. But then over time, the producing became my main gig, and Shot Factory has remained a great partner over the years in that. And I've done so many different movies that I just treasure, and it's kind of like pinch yourself because I can't believe I'm a part of this. I can't believe it.
Yeah, exactly. And and it just makes you feel that much more fulfilled with life, knowing that you actually get to have a career out of doing something that you love.
Yeah, yeah, it's a tremendous honor. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I actually got the Summer Party Massacre Collection DVD, and I noticed that with that there wasn't the Scream Factory label on that. So I'm assuming that that was done before Scream Factory.
I think, yeah, because what happened what happened was, and I'm looking at it to see how it's labeled over here. Yeah, it was that was pre-Scream, because that was when Shout first acquired the Roger Corman catalog,
Uh huh.
and so they were starting to release them under this like Roger Corman Presents banner or something like that. I can't remember what the heading is on the front of it. So that was when that was being released, is when the Scream Factory thing was starting to sort of bubble up, and the concept was growing internally at Shout. And Cliff McMillan and Jeff Nelson would be able to tell the story much more thoroughly than I in terms of how it all came around. But
Right.
yeah, that was some of the final horror stuff under the Shout Factory company banner prior to Scream Factory being a thing. And what a great release. I mean, no one else was willing to give Slumber Party Massacre 1, 2, and 3 new releases.
That's a
It's kind
shame.
of it's like Anchor Bay was so revolutionary in the VHS age when they were re-releasing so many movies in beautiful new transfers and eventually widescreen tapes. And they brought all of that Italian stuff over, like Argento and Fulci. And then Scream Factory was a huge part of the sort of second wave of that was getting more into the independent films, not as much of an international focus, not focused on classics by sort of the general reference classics like a Frankenstein or whatever, but getting into cult films, getting into the Roger Corman stuff, investing in Slumber Party Massacre 1, 2, and 3. And I think that just to fans, man, we were all just wowed. Like, is a company doing this? They're really doing it. And they're not alone, of course. There's Blue Underground and Synapse and other labels that have been doing it for years, very, very expertly as well. But it was, yes, I mean, Scream was right there. And they continue to do really cool stuff.
And I was really happy with that DVD set, especially considering that that was my first time ever even watching those movies. I got that back when I was in high school, and what I
Mm-hmm.
loved about it was actually getting features, actually getting information about how those movies were made
Yeah.
and all that. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely great for film fans to actually, get to have that knowledge and insight as to how all that was done.
Yeah, that's on any film. There's what I've learned over time, because you don't work on everything that you love. You don't just get gigs on movies that you treasure. You get all kinds of different things. So I've been introduced to films, seeing them for the first time when am working on it, producing the features for them. But I can say that one of the great lessons in all of this has been that there are amazing stories, often funny, sometimes scary and unbelievable stories behind every movie, no matter what its scale, who's involved with it, or where it came from. There's always great stories from behind the making. And I think that's especially valuable to aspiring filmmakers.
Oh yeah.
And in particular on indie movies where the filmmakers had to go through hell to get something done, and they came out the other end and survived it, and now there's this thing that people really love. And I think there's so much to be found in special features, more than just like here's how this movie was made. I think there's a lot more than that to it.
Exactly, yeah. And when you mentioned independent filmmakers going through hell just to get it made, the first thing that came to my mind, I don't know if you ever saw the movie, it reminded me of Ed Wood.
Oh, that's my favorite Tim Burton film, and I think I always say it's my favorite movie about filmmaking because
Oh yeah, certainly.
it's not just a love letter to Ed, who I adore, but also it's a love letter to film. It's a love letter to cinema and to
Oh, it
never
is.
giving up, right?
Oh, it is, yeah. And I mean, it's also inspiring to know that he actually went through that all in real life. Like that whole thing with like the church funding Plan 9 from outer space, which is interesting to imagine that a church
Yeah.
of all people like would fund Plan 9 from outer space. Usually you would think that a church would be against that because of all the violence and
When it was called Grave Robbers from Outer Space. I mean
yeah.
that was the shooting title on that. There's a really great book called Nightmare and Ecstasy that I can't recommend highly enough. Picking up if anybody wants to dive a little deeper on the world of Ed Wood. That I think it's Rudolph Gray was the author, if I remember correctly. I still have my original copy from when I was in junior high, and it's stories, recollections from people in Ed's life, people who worked on different films with him or were on screen in some of his movies, talking about their time working with him. And it's so great and hilarious and insightful. This guy just had this unyielding inspiration. He wanted to create, he needed to create. It didn't matter what scale it was or if anybody even cared that he was doing it. I just have so much admiration for just doing what you love regardless of audience. It's really inspiring.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, and even though from my research he never actually met Orson Welles in real life, but
Right.
yet that scene during the third act of the movie where he actually meets Orson Welles, knowing that all throughout the movie, Ed Wood is talking about how he admires Orson Welles and how he was one of his inspirations,
Yeah.
and then how at the end he actually gets to meet him, and then how at the end he actually hears those words of wisdom
Mhm.
from somebody who he admired, saying that that dreams are worth that dreams are worth to fight for.
Yeah, and I think that that was just Larry Karaszewski and his writing partner with that. They made the leap because Orson Welles was such an inspiration to Ed. So that's getting into Ed's head a little bit at that point in the film. And I think it's wonderful. The whole thing has kind of a dreamlike quality to it, but it's such a sincere presentation of what Hollywood was like at that point too. I oh man, I love that movie so much. That is one of the greatest movies of all time.
Yeah, and I mean that's a movie I can watch over and over and over again, and I can never ever get tired of it. It's just a real shame like that it bombed out the box office when it first came out.
Well, it's the least obvious studio picture ever. I think that was them throwing Tim Burton a bone at a time when Tim Burton was a cash cow for them. So if he says, "Hey, I want to make this movie about this guy, Ed Wood," they go, "All right, but just make sure that we talk about Alice in Wonderland down the road or whatever." I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So and
Probably, yeah.
he's had that opportunity a few times, and he's one of the few directors that are real auteurs that probably could wield that kind of influence in Hollywood. I don't know if it would be the same in 2024, but I do think that that speaks volumes about Warner's belief in Tim and their willingness to let him do stuff like that in Frankenweenie, the original,
Uh-huh.
and then the eventual animated film. And Edward Scissorhands is another one. I remember seeing that in theaters 5 times when I was a kid and just bawling my eyes out every time, but I was so in love with that enchanting story about this outsider because I related to it so much. And then I found if you look at Tim's films, they're about outsiders. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to relate to that stuff. And Ed Wood, years later, was an extension of that. So
It,
he's,
it,
I love
exactly.
him so much. I love Tim.
Yeah, and I mean, considering that when he did Batman, I mean, Batman's an outsider, and Edward Scissorhands and Ed Wood, and I'm pretty sure that there's plenty more examples. But yeah, and I mean, ultimately, I feel like that it's because that Tim Burton does understand those characters, and
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, there isn't anyone better to do those characters, besides somebody like who already understands how it's like.
Yeah, the second Beetlejuice just came out. Look at the character of Lydia. I mean, that's another thing. It's another character that's poured in out of this into this same mold of a someone who feels like an outsider in their family and in their world. And if you look at Sleepy Hollow, Ichabod, the way that Tim presents Ichabod in that, he's definitely an outsider in that film, and he's kind of a fish out of water. That's where Tim is best, is when he's doing stuff like that, I think.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And yeah, so you mentioned Batman. Oh no, wait, no, wait. I think that I was the one who mentioned Batman. Sorry, but out of all incarnations of Batman, there have been plenty of them. Which I mean, I get it. Batman's a big name franchise and probably always will be. But yeah,
Mhm.
so out of all incarnations, what would you say is your top favorite one?
My favorite, just because of everything we've been talking about, is Michael Keaton, and I love Batman, and I love Batman. Tim Burton, the two Tim Burton Batman films are my favorites. Period. Nothing in my mind has ever come close, and a lot of that has to do with where things were culturally at the time when they came out. Those kinds of superhero movies were not at all common, and that kind of darkness being brought to that world, especially to Batman. Because as a kid, I grew up seeing that the original TV series on like Nickelodeon, Nick at Night or something. I don't remember where I was catching it, but I mean, it was like a real life cartoon, and it was all goofy, and that was intentionally slapstick and stuff like that. So to see this dark, ominous story that was so entertaining. That was the first event VHS tape I was ever given at Christmas. That's all I wanted the year when that hit home video was Batman on video, and that was the last thing I opened. And I remember losing my mind getting this movie. I was absolutely on the Batman train at that point, and I maintain that he is my favorite out of all of them. Although everyone has their own good things about them. Who would you say is your favorite?
I think I probably would have to say Michael Keaton as well. It's because that he was the first incarnation of Batman that I ever saw, and so therefore, because of that, whenever I hear the name Batman, it's always that version like that comes to my mind.
Yeah,
And what I also love about him is that he was the only one who could smile, but yet he could also like sense like fear down like your spine as well.
mm,
And that's also what I loved about him. I also loved his voice as Batman. It's
yeah,
like he did alter it, and it was intimidating, but it wasn't as over the top like as Christian Bale's was.
right,
I mean, a lot of people love to make fun of Christian Bale's Batman voice, which
yeah,
I get it. It's easy to poke fun at it.
yeah, yeah. It's, but you got to imagine what Christian Bale was up against at the point where he was playing Batman. It's kind of like when anything huge and iconic culturally is revisited. Boy, that those are big shoes to fill. So you want to make it different. And Christian Bale is a master of his craft. So I think I guess that was probably an extension of the darkness that his embodiment of Bruce Wayne, that was a part of that darkness within him, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, Michael Keaton can do no wrong as Batman. I just really think I would love to see him back in another one. If he's into doing sequels now, let's do another Batman film and let's have Tim Burton direct it. Bring that
Exactly.
sexy original Batmobile from '89 back. The best Batmobile, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
certainly.
Love it. Love that car. Yeah, let's do it.
But yeah, I definitely was happy that in the Flash that we got to see that again,
Yeah,
and it was cool to see Michael Keaton back as Batman. But I don't know if you have seen that movie or not, and I
I
want
haven't. I've
to.
only
Okay,
seen clips.
then I don't want to talk about spoilers. But yeah, it definitely was great to see him back. And I mean, it's a shame that it wasn't directed by Tim Burton, but hey, but at least that we got to see him back and we got to see the original 89 Batmobile back. I also heard that he did do Batgirl,
Yeah, I was gonna bring
and
that up. Yeah.
it's a real shame that that movie got canceled all because of tax reasons. And as far as I can tell, unless if there's a bootleg of it, I don't think that we ever will see it. And I'm like, great. So then that means that you wasted everyone's time, like who made that movie.
Yeah, just imagine that. Imagine being part of anything in front of or behind the camera on a show that literally just gets deleted. That's unbelievable to me that
Oh, it
Warner
is.
did that. I cannot believe it.
Yeah, it's like you wasted all that money, wasted all that work, all that effort, and and people, including myself, and more than likely you as well, were also excited to see Michael Keaton come back yet again.
Yeah,
And it's like, great, now we won't ever know what those scenes would have been like.
I
And
know.
and since it was canned by Warner Brothers, I don't know who or how that they'll get their hands on it. I like to do a bootleg of it.
I mean, you never know. Maybe down the road, someone will come in as like some heavy director who's a big name can come in and say, "Okay, let's do this. Let's find that footage. Let's put something together." I just would love to know more and to see more about what all went down with that because I can't think of another example of something that from all I've heard was shot. It was basically done, and they just decided to just throw it away. It's incredible to me. Incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I don't know how accurate this is, but I also heard that Warner Brothers did the same thing with yet another movie. I don't know how accurate
Mm,
that is, but if it is accurate, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. I mean, if that is accurate, then that would be pretty frustrating because not only did it happen to Batgirl, but also happened to some other movie too.
yeah. A lot of hard work from everybody. No one sets out to make a bad movie. Everybody that's a part of a film has worked very hard for that, and that's the greatest shame for me is just all the that people put into such a thing and then for it to just go away. It's just sad.
Oh, it is, yeah, and and that knowing that that was the first Batgirl solo movie, knowing that as far as my understanding goes, they tried to make a Batgirl movie for the longest time. I don't know if it was going to go to theaters or if it was going to go straight to HBO Max. I'm not.
Hmm.
Well, it's now called Max, but
Right.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really really frustrating, and knowing that Michael Keaton, he's not getting any younger, and so fans want to see him as Batman again
Yeah.
as much as possible.
Yep.
So
Yep. Let's hope it doesn't happen again anytime soon.
yeah, let's definitely hope not, because that would be really really frustrating. But yeah, what are your thoughts on all of the rest of the actors who play Batman, like Val Kilmer and George Clooney and Ben Affleck, and now Robert Pattinson?
I have I I think that Val Kilmer is the one that I was the least into out of all of them. I think George Clooney is a natural Bruce Wayne. I don't know that he's a natural Batman. And working with Schumacher, as much as I love Batman and Robin, that movie's just insane.
It
It's
is.
so purely insane, and I love it for all the reasons that it's crazy. But is that my favorite Batman? Absolutely not. I think Pattinson brought this pathos to it, this real darkness to the character, and I appreciate the realism. And it's almost more like it's approached almost like a John Wick film, where it's this symphony of violence that's happening in that newer one from front to back, and such an incredible darkness. So I don't know. I think they all bring something unique to it. Although I'm not a big fan of, like I said, the Val Kilmer one. As much as I love Val Kilmer as an actor, but isn't it interesting that the only time they've really pivoted away from the darkness that Tim Burton established in Batman was when Joel Schumacher did this kind of cartoony send up almost of the genre. But once Tim Burton set that, that's how high the bar was
Hmm.
after Tim Burton got his hands on the Batman thing, is that no one can shake it from that point forward. That's amazing.
Exactly, yeah. And according to my research, the reason for that was because Batman Returns like was supposed to have like a Happy Meal tie-in with McDonald's, but parents were complaining that it was too violent, and therefore Warner Brothers wanted Tim Burton to tone it down, but Tim Burton didn't want to do that. And then Tim Burton left. And then after he left, Michael Keaton didn't want to be involved anymore. And so
Right.
they went and found a new Batman, and they toned it down, and they made it a lot more toyetic. I mean, even Joel Schumacher, while directing Batman and Robin, like was telling everybody, okay, we're gonna be making a toy commercial, and looking at the Batmobile and the costumes and just the overall feel of the movie, it definitely does feel like a toy commercial.
Oh, yeah, I love how unapologetic he is about that, though, and I think it's even in the if you watch it with the commentary that's on there, he and everyone else are admitting that they were trying to sell toys. They were trying to sell action figures and play sets and stuff. It's consumerism hybrid it's a hybrid of consumerism and film, which has happened so many times, but never so blatantly as in that one, and I appreciate his bravery and just being honest about that and popping out and saying, "Look, guys, this is what we were trying to do. For better or for worse, we hope you like it, but they wanted us to move toys." I kind of admire that honesty. But I
It,
do think Batman Returns is a masterstroke. I love that movie so much.
oh yeah, certainly. I mean, Batman Returns has a special place in my heart, considering that that movie actually was released the year that I was born.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So good.
And I mean, Batman and Batman Forever. I have been a big Jim Carrey fan since I was a kid, and I've been a big Batman fan as a kid, and so on. Then when my mom told me as a kid that Jim Carrey is in a Batman movie, I definitely will never forget just how excited I was. I was like, oh my goodness, like two things I love like are combined into one.
Yeah, and that felt like that movie too felt like a comic book, didn't it? I mean,
Oh, it did.
that's almost as close to the original TV series as the franchise ever got theatrically in that one. Just the colors, everything is so drenched in colors, and they're so fun to watch. That and Batman and Robin are just a feast for the eyes from front to back.
Yeah, exactly. And even in Batman Forever, there even was that line like said by Robin, like holy rusted metal, Batman."
Great stuff.
Oh
Great
yeah,
stuff.
certainly. And even in Batman and Robin, they took it even farther, like how Batman actually had the Bat credit card.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and nipples.
Oh, the nipples on the bat suit. Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Yeah, right, right. You can't forget that. And the shots of him putting on his belt is like just a big bat ass shot. And oh man, that movie's the audacity of that film is wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I feel like those two movies, if you have like a drinking game watching it, like if you count all the cheesy moments, all the shots of Batman's
You
butt,
wouldn't survive, Eric.
no, no, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if everyone's ever thought of that before, but if not,
Yeah.
might
Oh,
think that would
I'm
be
sure it's
fun.
been done. Yeah, yeah. What are your thoughts on Superman? I haven't seen some of the more current stuff. I was really disappointed, speaking to Tim Burton, that the Tim Burton Superman with Nicolas Cage never happened. Have you seen the documentary about that one called "Whatever Happened to Superman Lives"?
Yeah, I saw parts of it. Wasn't that directed by John Schnepp, I believe?
Yeah, and it's so good. If you have a chance to see the whole thing, unfortunately, he's passed on now, but it's
That's a
still
shame.
out there. Yeah, and what a wild story of how a producer can come in and just sink a ship. I mean, the ideas that they were trying to shoehorn into Tim's vision are just insane. But I'm a huge Nick Cage fan, and I think he would have been a tremendous Superman. And Tim Burton, come on, let him take Superman
Yeah,
too. You
exactly. Yeah,
know,
and
he already had Batman.
but yeah, I did see that one video like of Kevin Smith talking about the absurd ideas like that John Peters had, like how
Yeah,
he wanted Superman to not fly, not wear the suit, wanted him to fight polar bears, fight a
and
giant
and the
spider.
Targaryen snare beast.
Yeah,
Yeah, all that stuff.
exactly.
It's so wild. But that's what I'm talking about. Like you have a movie and then a producer walks in the door and just goes, "All right, everybody, here's how it's gonna go." And you go, "Wait, we already know what we're doing here. We already have a plan in place." And he's like, "Nope, there's gonna be polar bears. We're gonna have a giant mechanical spider, and we don't want the cape on Superman anymore. That's old. That's lame." Like, what? Are you kidding me?
It's like that's Superman.
Yeah, right.
And what made that so hilarious is just the way how Kevin Smith like was describing
Oh yeah.
his experience, and what really made it funny at the very end, like when he said that he went to go watch Wild Wild West. At the very end, a movie by John Peters, and what do you know? There's a giant
Giant
spider in it.
spider. Yeah, exactly. Yep. It was gonna happen one way or the other with John.
Exactly. Oh my gosh! Like I can watch that over and over again, and I laugh every time that I see
Oh
that.
yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, Nicolas Cage as Superman, while not the ideal choice, it is interesting. It's a shame that that movie never happened.
I know.
I heard that according to rumor, I don't know how true this is. They wanted Tim Allen like as Brainiac.
Oh my gosh, that would have been bizarro. Nicolas Cage did end up voicing Superman on the I think Teen Titans.
Yeah,
He,
yeah, yeah.
which is
I
really
believe so.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so at least that he finally got to have his chance.
Yep. Yeah, a little bit. Look, he got his foot in there. Yeah.
Yeah, even though it was a voice role, but at least that he got to have his chance.
Yep.
And yeah, as far as my thoughts on Superman, I mean, I saw the Christopher Reeve movies as a kid. I love Superman 1, 2, and 3 as a kid, while 3, as an adult, I get it. It's not as good as the first two. Superman 4 is pretty much the equivalent of Batman and Robin.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with like Nuclear Man and his nails. Well, I guess he sure nailed it.
No.
And yeah, and it was clear that the budget on that was severely cut. Like there's the same shot over and over again of Superman flying, and
Yeah. At least they got to make the Supergirl movie. I thought that was pretty good. I like that one.
yeah, I've heard of the Supergirl movie, but I haven't ever seen it. So
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And I wish that, like we said earlier, that Batgirl would have gotten her chance too. Maybe someday. Who knows?
yeah, I guess you just gotta wait and see. And yeah, Superman Returns. I saw that in theaters back when I was a kid. That actually was the first IMAX movie that I ever saw.
Ooh, that's a good one in IMAX. Yeah.
Oh yeah, certainly. And I mean, I will never forget like just how entrenched I was, like seeing Superman fly on that gigantic
Oh
screen.
my gosh.
And then when I watched it on TV afterwards, didn't, it just didn't feel the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, IMAX. That's a singular experience, right? No matter what you see there, there's no way to replicate that at home. So yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
get it.
certainly. And yeah, and then I did see Man of Steel in theaters.
Hmm.
I was so excited for that movie, and just my own personal opinion. I personally was disappointed by it. I just felt like that the story just was kind of all over the place. I felt like the tone was not consistent. Some of the jokes felt forced, while it was funny. But how at the end, when that girl said that she thought that he was hot, that was funny. Yes, it was funny,
Yeah.
but it just,
I
uh,
hear you. I hear you.
yeah, yeah, and Batman v Superman. It's like so Superman grieved about killing Zod, but then at Batman v Superman, he goes right back to killing people again. It's like, did you not learn anything from Man of Steel?
Right. Yeah. No memory of what happened there.
It, and it was a missed opportunity. It's because that Batman has his "I don't kill" rule, and so then therefore, like it could have created great conflict about how Superman killed Zod
That's a good
and Batman
point.
with this "I don't kill" rule, and that was just such a missed opportunity.
That's a really great point. Yeah.
And yeah, Batman v Superman. I was disappointed by that movie too. I mean, it's nothing against it's nothing against Ben Affleck. I don't think that he was the problem. It was just the script. And yeah, and everybody likes to poke fun at the ending, like about how both of their moms have the exact same name. I've seen so many memes about that.
I'm sure. Oh yeah. Yeah. People are passionate about this stuff.
Certainly, yeah. And I mean, I can imagine that you've had to experience that, like with working with Trancas International and the Halloween franchise.
Yeah. I mean, oh gosh. that's a very polarizing universe. There's a people definitely take sides and pick favorites in that franchise, and they will argue until they're blue in the face about what they
Exactly.
love or don't love about it. Any given entry, for sure.
Which is what I loved about Scream 5, even though it's just called Scream, but just for simplicity purposes, I call it Scream 5.
Sure.
But yeah, what I loved about that movie is how they actually addressed that. Like about how just while I'm not trying to blanket all fans of every franchise like this, but there definitely are some fans who take it to the absolute extreme.
Sure. Yeah, that's the case in all fandom, I think.
Oh yeah, certainly, yeah. Like with like the Star Wars fandom, Batman, Sonic the Hedgehog. Like with Sonic the Hedgehog, back when Sonic 4 came out, there were fans like who were so upset about how Sonic has green eyes. I mean,
I
listen
mean,
to how petty that sounds.
yeah, but I mean, it's what they're into, and if you're that steeped in the mythology and you know enough to recognize that the eyes are the wrong color, kudos to you for being that for having that kind of depth into something like that, because those are the people who keep things going. They're the ones the passionate fans are always going to be the most devoted, who help support these things on release day and all of that. And it stinks when they're disappointed with something, but filmmakers can't. Sometimes you just overlook something. Sometimes you have a producer walk in and say they want a Targaryen snare beast, giant spider in the film, and you go, there is no giant spider in Sonic, but okay, we'll figure it out. And then you
One
have to
way
put it in
or
there.
yeah, one way or another, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So yeah, so we're nearing the end. So I guess two final questions.
Hmm.
What are some thought provoking and inspiring life quotes that you would want to share?
Oh my gosh. I've heard so many. I have a really bad memory for quotes and trivia and stuff. I've heard so many great things from people over the years in interviews about what led them to the business or what lessons were learned from it.
Uh
But
huh.
the one quote that I like to say to people that it's so cliche to even say it, but it really does hold true, and it's universal. And I'm a big hockey fan, hockey player, and all of that. And Wayne Gretzky once said, "You miss 100% of the shots you never take." And I know that that's often quoted, and I think that's for good reason, because that's
Oh yeah.
applicable to any scenario, any situation. It's like, try it, give it a shot. That's what I mean, like I taught you asked me about what got me interested in movies. I mean, being a fan of this stuff, I never dreamed of doing it or being any, like, even a flea on the back of the dog that is the business or whatever. I mean, I'm a speck in that universe, but even to be that is just something that was absolutely unimaginable. And you think back to those fragile little moments that led to where you are, and think about how so many little decisions could have led down a different path, and you may not have ended up in the same boat that you're in. So it's all about taking those shots, for sure. So that would be my quote of wisdom, would be from Wayne Gretzky.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, it definitely is a quote that I've heard before. And yeah, and I mean, like what you said, that there's a reason why that people bring that up a lot. It's because it truly does work.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, so my final question, is there anything that you want to plug in?
I mean, there's always a bunch of new releases coming out. If you go to my website, which is justinbeam.com, there's a coming soon page there that has all the links and details to upcoming titles, magazine articles, whatever is on the way. So that would probably be the main thing, is just head to justinbeam.com and you can stay on top of whatever's current, because there's always more coming.
Awesome. Well, yeah. I'll be sure to leave a link for your website, like for
Thank
all my
you.
kind viewers to see. So, and then that way they can check out your stuff.
Yeah, appreciate it. And Eric,
Yeah,
thank you so much for having me on here. This has been a delight. Thank you. So I never get to talk superheroes. So thank you for having me on.
yeah. Of course. And I mean, I can imagine that you probably got used to talking about horror films, which I mean, of course, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, film is film. We all love so many different things, and it's a treat to be able to explore some different territory. So I appreciate it, man.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be a guest. And yeah, and people in the audience, just be sure to check out Justin Beam's website, follow him on Instagram, follow him on Facebook, or whichever other form of social media that Justin has. And thank you all for watching. You all have a fantastic day.